Please welcome Bec O'Neal with her story, Big Girls Don't Cry.
Okay. When you lose 30 pounds in 8 weeks, people ask you, "You look great. What's your secret?" I'm 20 years old and I want everything to appear effortless. I just started eating healthy, you know. But behind closed doors, no fridges opened, the cupboards were bare, and I went to bed hungry every night. I was consuming just 300 calories a day and was diagnosed with both depression and an eating disorder. But Kate Moss's statement became my mantra: nothing tastes as good as skinny feels. My relationship with food and my body was always difficult, which manifested from a young age. We were a meat and potatoes kind of family. Manners and big appetites went hand in hand. The bangers and mash, sausage plat and Heinz baked beans, faggots and gravy, which I should explain is a hearty local cheap favourite consisting of whatever remained on the slaughterhouse floor. They were all heartily consumed with a dollop of, "No, you can't leave the table until you've eaten the same size portion as your dad," and "Yes, I know you're only 7 years old, but this beef stew needs eating up and it will put hairs on your chest. And don't even think about asking for dessert unless you've helped with the washing up." I was a studious, never in trouble, polite to adult kind of kid with excellent table manners and always an empty plate. But I wasn't the best at making friends. At primary school, or as you would call it, elementary school, there were only 11 kids in my class. I went to a tiny school in Shropshire, the northwest of England, and there was only 11 kids in my class, and I was one of the 3 girls, and so was immediately third wheel in the group. At lunch, the 11 of us would sit at the cafeteria table. The contents of our lunch boxes ranged from the classic ham sandwich to the more trendy Lunchables and Dairy triangles, but never the classic PB&J, of course. That would be considered far too American. My marinara-stained Tupperware box contained, however, without a doubt, every day a king-sized Mars bar. I would devour that 500-calorie chunk of nougat and caramel while Polly sat there with her couscous and Claire with her pita and hummus. But it wasn't doing me any favors after all. Nobody wanted to be friends with the fat kid. That was the first time, or around the time, I started to become conscious of my weight. I remember a time when I was at my third cousin's baptism, and the whole of my dad's side of the family were bundled on the patio, congratulating the new parents. The buffet, of course, was a classic and usual British love affair consisting of cocktail sausages and cheese and pineapple on a stick. I piled my plate high as everybody else, just because we all knew the Scotch eggs were going to be the first casualty. "She's a big girl, isn't she?" I heard as I went to find a chair. And then I looked over and I saw my nan and some other family friends look over at myself and smile sympathetically. And I was only 9 years old. I began secret eating when I got home from school, grabbing a sausage roll from the fridge when Mum wasn't looking, putting an extra packet of Monster Munch in my robe to take upstairs before bedtime. Eating became my comfort blanket. I would gorge myself when I was stressed, when I was anxious, when I felt insecure, consuming thousands of extra calories of anything I could secretly sideswipe without being at risk of being caught. I would indulge in every last bite and quickly dispose of the evidence in shame. And so began a vicious cycle which plagued me throughout my childhood and teen years. Fast forward a decade, and it's the summer of 2011, and I'd just come out of a 4-year relationship. Changing my Facebook status to single was overwhelming. However, I became even more increasingly conscious of my appearance, and especially the number on the bathroom scales. It was like someone had stripped me bare and pushed me out into the middle of a large crowd. I felt very alone, but most of all, I felt very ashamed. One afternoon, I was driving to my sister's house. She lived in a quaint little town in Lincolnshire, East England, which was about a 2.5-hour drive away. After pulling over at a petrol station just to wash my hands after having devoured an entire family-sharing bag of ranch-flavored Doritos, I knew something needed to change. I needed to deal with this breakup in an entirely new way. So, I quickly learned that if you stay up past 3 a.m. on a diet of cheap rosé wine and vodka cokes, you'll sleep through both breakfast and lunch, so you'll only need to worry about dinner. Bingo. Not only was this much friendlier to my student grocery budget for the week, but only consuming 300 calories of food a day is bound to do my figures some favors. But when you lose that amount of weight quickly, people are soon to tell you how good you look. Sure, the attention is great, but while the numbers on the scales continue to plummet, the fear of putting the weight back on filled me with dread. The first semester of my final year was coming to an end, and the pressure of exams, dissertation, and balancing my newfound social life was beginning to take its toll, and I was beginning to comfort eat all over again. The problem was, it was never any of my own food because I just wasn't buying any. One time, one of my roommates had brought home a lemon cake and left it on the countertop. She had had a small, suggested serving size sliver to enjoy responsibly before wrapping the rest up and heading to bed at a reasonable hour. One night, around 3 a.m., while drunkenly walking through the kitchen to use the bathroom, which is a very typical setup in a Victorian house in England, I vaguely remember thinking to myself, if I match her size of slice, she'll barely notice, right? The next morning, or rather the next afternoon, after I'd hit snooze several times, I came downstairs to the kitchen and found on the countertop a familiar colored Post-it note, and it read, "You owe me a cake." Surrounding it were sprinkles of crumbs which had once formed a lovely, responsibly nibbled at lemon cake, and I had eaten the entire thing. I began to binge eat more and more, always in secret, always in the middle of the night. My roommates probably thought we had a family of rats scurrying around the cupboards, munching on everything. Rats that could somehow miraculously open jars of peanut butter and unscrew the lid to the chocolate milk. I somehow graduated that year. I stopped going to seminars because I could barely get myself dressed and out of bed due to the crippling depression. And when I did go out, I would rush to a bar, get myself a drink, put myself at ease. But I would always come home drunk, binge eat, not my own food, go to bed and be unable to get out of bed, and the whole thing would happen all over again. All my peers were finishing school to continue on to a master's program, into some great company in London, go traveling and discover themselves. But my therapist advised me against all of the above. You need to focus on you. Fast forward 6 years, and this is me. I'm 20 pounds heavier, but I'm the happiest I've ever been. I took my therapist's advice. I got healthier, but more importantly, I got smarter. I used to think, after giving myself an eating disorder, that it was my addiction to food what had led me to this point. My family always telling me to finish my plate, my nan's baking, unsupervised access to all of my favorite foods. It was all contributing to this big appetite, which I was made to feel shameful. But what if it wasn't? What if emotional eating wasn't a bad thing? What if it's just a helpful coping mechanism? What if it's the best you could do to look after yourself and soothe at that particular moment, to deal with stress, to deal with trauma, to deal with bullying? What if Weight Watchers, diet shakes, Photoshop models, what if they were all like complete bullshit? All my life, I had punished myself for wanting to eat to the point where I didn't. to the point where my insecurities had compromised my mental health, my relationship with others, and more importantly, my relationship with myself. We think that we're made of numbers, percentages on tests, pounds on a scale, likes on a photo, but we're not. We're made of love, happiness, and we're made to laugh. We're made of good memories and of late nights. We have more substance than numbers. And that's when I realized, perhaps the best kept secret to loving yourself is to stop giving a fuck.